Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. Today, we are continuing our coverage of the ongoing war taking place inside of Ukraine between the Russian Federation and Ukrainian military forces. It's March 3rd, 2022. And the fighting continues on very, very broad fronts. And we're going to continue to analyze and have a look exactly what's going on and what could happen in the near future as well. But first, starting in the area of operations near Kiev or Kyiv, however you wish to pronounce it, there continues to be Russian military activity to the north and northwest and west of Kiev. We continue to hear about this large military convoy that has quote unquote stalled, according to a variety of media outlet reports. But again, it is cause and effect. It's a very, very large military formation that is moving from north to south towards Kiev, which is controlled by active elements of the Ukrainian army, which have deployed a number of both regular army brigades and a huge amount, massive amounts of territorial defense force units as well, and that's just ordinary citizens forming combat units to fight against the Russian onslaught. But we're also seeing the Ukrainians blow bridges. And when you start blowing bridges, it becomes very, very difficult, especially if you're kind of a road-bound military at this point. And right now, due to some climate conditions in and around Kiev, it would appear that for the most part, the Russian army is operating along road networks. And again, if we get a little closer here, we can see how easy it is for the Ukrainian military to blow bridges that would cause the Russians obviously to stop and bring up engineer units, and those engineer units have to be provided security where they can conduct their operations. And again, it's very difficult to do that. So again, let's say you're going to repair or put up a pontoon bridge or a bridge across this terrain feature here. This is the Irpin River, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right. But again, obviously this area, the Ukrainians would have an artillery fix on this location, and they would have forward reconnaissance elements, most likely positioned in some of these houses or concealed near this route of advance. And if they were to see that the Russians were bringing up engineer units to either repair or to facilitate a river crossing, they could call in direct artillery fire. They could start launching Javelin anti-tank guided weapon systems at these engineering units. So preparatory work has to take place before these Russian units can continue to advance. And again, as I talked about before this conflict even started, that this was going to be something like we haven't seen in many, many decades. The Ukrainian army is not a pushover force. In 2014, things were a lot different than they are now. Yes, the Ukrainian military faced many, many challenges. But after 2014, the West started to hand out money to the Ukrainians, and the Ukrainians also themselves started to take a very keen interest in the development of their armed forces, and we're kind of seeing the product of that now. At the same time, we're also seeing a mass mobilization of the Ukrainian citizen population that is being armed and is now, for all intensive purposes, becoming part of that army. So again, as I talked about, the Ukrainian ground forces prior to the start of the conflict was was about 150, 160,000 people, personnel, with another 50, 60,000 in the National Guard. You also have border troops. You have police forces, and all those forces are going to be militarized and become part of that Ukrainian military force. So rapidly, you're going to see Ukrainian forces numbering 500,000 men, probably within the next couple of weeks, and probably within 30 days, they will start to exceed 500,000 personnel. And we're seeing that. We're seeing the country militarize all across Ukraine. Young men and women, even old men and old women are signing up to join the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces, which is just an extension of the Ukrainian military. So this idea that the Russians could just blitz south through these dense forests and just take Kiev, as we were hearing about at the onset of the conflict, is just simply ludicrous. It would be very, very difficult to do. And again, even during the United States advance up towards Baghdad, we had a large columns of forces that it was very, very difficult to move those forces at times. It was slow going for the U.S. forces as well. So what we're seeing north of Kiev is just something that's not uncommon in war, and especially when you have a very capable opposing force in the form of the Ukrainian military being actively supported by the West. So again, if we harken back to Gulf War II, where in 2003, what if the Iraqis were being openly supplied by, say, the Turks or the Russians, or even the Iranians, and in a massive way. And that's what we're seeing now in this conflict. Again, the Ukrainians are getting their hands on some pretty high-tech weaponry right now, and obviously that is also causing some issue for the Russians as well as they continue to advance. But it looks like right now, just in terms of the Kiev area of operations, they continue to look to maneuver and encircle. They're continuing to bring up reconnaissance elements and then targeting some of these positions of the Ukrainians with heavy artillery. And again, this is classic Russian doctrine: forward deploy your reconnaissance units and then conduct mass fires with artillery and multiple launch rocket systems of varying type. And they're continuing to use both fixed wing and attack helicopters as well. So they're shaping the battlefield and continuing to advance. Over here on the east side of the Dnieper River, it looks like they're trying to create a pocket around Chernihiv. And we know there was at least one tank brigade operating near Chernihiv. A number of territorial defense units are also operating in this area, special operations forces, possible air mobile units of the Ukrainian military. And it looks like they're going to continue to move in a southwest manner to eventually cut off any route of escape out of Chernihiv, and that's going to require a fairly large and robust force construct to do that. And it's going to take some time and some maneuvering. And again, the Ukrainian military, the Ukrainian army is a pretty good force, and it's fighting. And anytime you have that in any war, you're going to see progress get stalled and take some time to kind of circumnavigate and adapt to what you're seeing from the enemy forces. In Kharkov, we continue to see the Russians pound that city. The city is resisting. Again, the Ukrainian resistance is very aggressive and very robust. and the Russians are having to turn to what I would say they do best, and that is the use of massed fires, artillery and Grad rocket systems, and we're seeing that being deployed en masse along a very broad front as the Russians continue to methodically advance towards some of their objectives. And I would say, just to touch on that real quick, the war goal right now of the Russian Federation appears to be, at least at this stage, given the other operations we're seeing in the country, the total conquest of Ukraine and the elimination of the Ukrainian military, and then quite possibly the puppeting of that government. And it's going to be very, very challenging to do that given the mobilization. And as I talked about even before this started, when we were hearing General Milley and some of these other talking heads talk about how the Russians will take Kiev in 72 hours. Obviously, we're well past that. And I believe at the minimum, this conflict is going to go 30 days, and quite possibly much longer. And I talked about that before this conflict even started, that this was going to be a very intense conflict, the like of which has not been seen since World War II, or quite possibly the Korean War. And it will continue for some time because, again, the capabilities of both forces are of incredibly high quality. Well, maybe I'm getting a little carried away. They're very good forces. But as we continue down south, this is the only area in the map that's a bit incorrect, and it'll get it corrected. But we think there is a thin encirclement of Mariupol, with the Russian forces having enveloped and cut off Mariupol, and are now our understanding is that the Russian forces, again with classic Russian doctrine, with massed fires, are attempting to get the city to capitulate, and unfortunately that's going to lead to some very, very high civilian casualties. And another issue I wanted to talk about real quick too, that we're going to have the opportunity to see in this conflict that we haven't had the ability to see is military activity such as the likes of what happened in Stalingrad or Leningrad within the confines of social media and the ability to record events. We're going to start seeing military operations much like what occurred in World War II in terms of what happened in Stalingrad, what happened in Leningrad, to some of these very large cities in Ukraine. And again, this is modern warfare. We are many decades separated from what happened in World War II, but at the same time, a lot of these strategies are still relatively similar, with the exception of add-ons such as real-time intelligence and some new modern fundamentals of warfare that we're seeing. But again, in some of these sieges, and especially in terms of human suffering, it's going to be on your TV set. So prepare yourself for that. It's going to be something that the world really hasn't seen, other than maybe during some of the Yugoslav campaigns. But again, it's going to be much, much worse than that, given the capabilities that both sides have in this conflict. And again, just prepare yourself for that, because again, it's going to be horrendous, and it's not going to be pretty. In other areas, we continue to see the Russians advance out of Crimea. Right now, we anticipate, or we're seeing, a military operation underway near this nuclear power plant that sits on the Dnieper River. Now, this is a very, very large nuclear power plant. These are the reactors here. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 large reactors. Our understanding, or we've heard that this could be one of the largest nuclear power plants on the planet, and it's obviously an older power plant as well. So very, very concerning as fighting gets very, very close to this power plant, and if in fact there are engagements taking place near the power plant, because again, it wouldn't take a lot for something catastrophic to occur in the nuclear realm regarding this plant. And again, this plant provides a lot of electricity for Ukraine, and that's obviously why it is a target of the Russian military at this point. And we understand that the Ukrainians are actively resisting and are not going to capitulate at this point. This nuclear power plant. We've actually heard that there has been a counterattack within the vicinity by some elements of the Ukrainian military within the vicinity of Tokmak, and that's been going on for the last few days now. Into the west, we've seen the Russian forces fully secure Kherson and continue to move in a northwesterly direction in what appears to be an eventual movement towards Odessa, third largest city in Ukraine. And we've also heard reports that a fleet of Russian warships have left the Crimea and appear to be heading towards Odessa. There has been some talk of a possible new amphibious operation that could take place near Odessa. Again, given the fortifications that the Ukrainians have put near Odessa, and the I don't want to say fortifications, but the deployments of military assets to defend Odessa, and given its size, I would have to say that an amphibious landing on Odessa, I would say, is unlikely. Quite possibly further to the east, but again, if you look very closely at the map or the terrain features, there's a lot of cliffs and along the Black Sea coast near Odessa, and it makes it very, very challenging to land an amphibious force given the terrain. So they would have to land at more or less fixed beaches. But again, here these are actually cliffs that you can see here, and some of these cliffs are 10, 20 feet high, so fairly significant. It would not be easy for the Russians just to land at these locations, and in all likelihood they would need to land near some sort of port facility or near where Russian land forces will soon arrive, because those amphibious forces are at risk of getting cut off. We did see the Russians mount an amphibious operation near Mariupol. Now they only did that once they knew that Russian ground forces were not far off. But again, I highly doubt that we will actually see an amphibious operation on the city of Odessa. Odessa is very well defended, and it's going to be some time before the Russians can reduce the opposition near Odessa or even approach Odessa at this point. Again, there's other objectives that would need to be reduced and captured before the actual main body of any Russian advance could be deployed towards Odessa. You have a lot of rivers, as you can see here, on the routes to Odessa, and that's probably why you're seeing the Russian army do this wide arc to the northwest of some of these large river terrain features near the Black Sea coast. The Russian army is also having to deploy in Kherson too. Again, right now there doesn't appear to be a lot of active resistance to the Russian military in Kherson. Now that could change at a certain point. We could start to see infiltration groups of the Ukrainian territorials start to migrate their way towards Kherson, or we could see sleeper cells inside of Kherson waiting for some of these airborne, these high-end airborne troops that we know are now in Kherson to continue to advance to the northwest, and then those forces be replaced by elements of National Guard or Russian Federal Police forces that could be deployed into Kherson, and that's when you could see those sleeper cells within the Ukrainian resistance start to activate and actively fight Russian assets inside of Kherson. But right now, it would appear that you have some fairly high-end mechanized units of the Russian military in Kherson. Those were the units that actually entered the city. And yes, as we've talked about many times before, the Russian airborne forces are more or less also a mechanized force, albeit they are much lighter mechanized forces, but they do possess tanks and armored fighting vehicles. Very aggressive, fairly well-trained unit, and we're continuing to see those forces as the vanguard of a lot of these Russian advances deep into the Ukraine as the war continues. But that's the way the situation looks right now. Again, I know the map hasn't changed a lot, but at the same time, there's several objectives that the Russians are attempting to reduce, circumvent, and quite possibly either have them capitulate, or in some cases they're simply going to destroy some of these towns and cities with massed artillery fires, because the ability of the Russian military to move into a town such as Kharkov in mass would result in a significant amount of casualties for the Russians. And again, this is just a massive city with a fully working underground subway system with bomb shelters and nuclear-proof shelters, and ways to traverse the city underground without having to move around the city on the surface. So again, this is going to be something that's just we've never really seen in war before on this kind of magnitude, and especially given modern weaponry and technology that currently exists. This is just going to be both interesting to observe, but at the same time, it's going to be heartbreaking in a lot of ways as well, because of the loss of civilian life, unfortunately. But that's war, and that's where we're at. Again, I continue to worry about the deployment of Western support into Ukraine. Again, at a certain point, the Russians are going to have to make a strategic decision to cut off the border areas at some point. They're going to have to do it to prevent these weapons from getting into Ukraine, or they're going to be fighting in perpetuity unless they declare victory and leave. And it doesn't look like at this point the Russian army is going to do that. And we're starting to hear, as of within the last 24 hours, unconfirmed reports of Romanian aircraft missing or possibly being shot down. We have heard of an Estonian supply ship, an Estonian merchantman that was reportedly sunk off the coast of the Ukraine in the Black Sea. There was a reported explosion, and that ship went down. In all likelihood, it was probably due to a Russian anti-ship missile that took the ship out. And again, Estonia is a member of NATO. Quite possibly a very unwise decision, but nonetheless, Estonia is a member of NATO. And if we listen to what Russia is saying, if we listen to not just Vladimir Putin, but other leaders within the Russian Federation, this is a very, very serious situation. And just because the West has started to cut off or attack Russia in an economic manner, that doesn't mean that can become, that does not preclude it from becoming a military matter. And again, you hearken back to World War II and the relationship between Japan and the United States. It was economic issues that forced the hand of the Japanese military in World War II, which ultimately led to the surprise attack at Pearl Harbor. But again, we have to be very careful here. Russia has a lot of nuclear weapons, and it is angry, and it may lash out. Again, the possibility for a mistake or miscalculation along the western border areas of the Ukraine is also very, very possible. Again, we're hearing things that have happened in terms of some of these the reported Romanian aircraft getting shot down, the sinking of that Estonian vessel, among some other things we're tracking as well, that could possibly lead to, again, a miscalculation and the onset of World War III. That's all I have for now. Have a good day, everybody.